That night God appeared to Solomon and said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied to God, "You showed great and faithful love to David my father, and now you have made me king in his place. O Lord God, please continue to keep your promise to David my father, for you have made me king over a people as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me the wisdom and knowledge to lead them properly, for who could possibly govern this great people of yours?" God asks Solomon what he wants. Doesn't specify, just asks Solomon what he wants. Solomon's like, I got a tough task ahead of me. Give me the smarts, give me the wisdom to handle this properly. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so we begin our journey through 2nd Chronicles now, but before I do a quick recap of 1st Chronicles, well, really 1st and 2nd Chronicles is basically written to the exiles of Israel, probably more specifically those living within the Babylonian Empire, given the timing and whatnot. And it's essentially a reminder / recap of how they got into their current situation, and then maybe stemming from that, they can actually take action and figure out how to move on and actually, get back to how things were supposed to be. At least make their situation better. So 1st Chronicles actually started at the very beginning. There was a bunch of genealogy. Then it kind of got up to, like, the first couple of kings of Israel, and then it started getting significantly more detailed. I guess maybe in the mind of Ezra, that's where things kind of really started to look promising and then fairly quickly break down. Ezra is, I believe, the author of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. But anyway, so yeah, it covered, 1st Chronicles covered Saul briefly, and then a bunch of David. A lot of temple preparations and planning and things related to that. So, kind of at the end of 1st Chronicles, it was David literally handing Solomon the plans for the temple, giving kind of one last motivational speech to at least all the leadership of Israel. And that's kind of where we're at now. Solomon's king. Temple's presumably about to be built. And then we hop in here in 2nd Chronicles chapter 1. Solomon, son of David, took firm control of his kingdom, for the Lord his God was with him and made him very powerful. Solomon called together all the leaders of Israel, the generals and captains of the army, the judges, and the political and clan leaders. Then he led the entire assembly to the place of worship in Gibeon, for God's tabernacle was located there. This was the tabernacle that Moses, the Lord's servant, had made in the wilderness. Okay, so now it mentions God's tabernacle here, like that. Before the temple existed, there was the tabernacle, and that was like the main hub of worship for Israel up until the temple was built. So, of course, Solomon gathers the people there because there's stuff from the tabernacle that they need to put into the eventual temple that's built. Now, it says, back in verse 1, that God was with Solomon and made him very powerful. I mean, him, I think, more so means his kingdom. David did a bunch of conquering before Solomon, and that really kind of set the stage for a time of peace in Israel, where they could actually, dedicate the necessary time and attention to building the temple. So Solomon calls the leaders together and is presumably gonna start getting things ready to build the temple. Note there, generals and captains. Hebrew says commanders of thousands and of hundreds. Similar idea. I guess the number of troops they commanded was more indicative of their rank back in those times, or at least specifically for ancient Israel. Note there at God's tabernacle. Hebrew says the tent of meeting, which that's just kind of another way to refer to it. It was, I guess, specifically you could say the tent of meeting the Lord. Alright, so Solomon calls the leaders together, takes them to Gibeon because the tabernacle's there. And then we get to verse 4. David had already moved the Ark of God from Kiriath Jearim to the tent he had prepared for it in Jerusalem. But the bronze altar made by Bezalel, son of Uri, and grandson of Hur, was there at Gibeon in front of the tabernacle of the Lord. So Solomon and the people gathered in front of it to consult the Lord. There in front of the tabernacle, Solomon went up to the bronze altar in the Lord's presence and sacrificed 1,000 burnt offerings on it. Alright, so sacrificing 1,000 burnt offerings as an appeal to the Lord, probably to, seek God's blessing on this, and or, as it mentioned a little bit earlier, to seek his guidance and direction, for lack of a better way to put it. So, yeah, the bronze altar was kind of an important thing for the offerings in particular. So obviously they need to go get that. And I wonder if they were then going to bring it to the tent where the Ark of the Covenant was, just to not have those things separated. And they're both then kind of like on standby to be placed in their proper locations in the temple. But anyway, note there in verse 5, that's as in the Greek version and Latin Vulgate. Masoretic text reads, he placed instead of what? But the bronze altar, maybe it would just read, but the bronze altar he placed there at Gibeon. Okay. Just trying to figure out what the grammar would have been like with that wording in the note there. But yeah, so yeah, that getting the bronze altar seems to be at least a big reason why they went to Gibeon. Now at the end of verse 5, that note says the Hebrew reads as to consult him rather than the Lord. This is just being more specific who the him is. But it's kind of implied, like Solomon and the people gathered in front of it, being the bronze altar, to consult him. The previous him that would have been mentioned was the Lord. So grammatically that just tracks with what the him would have been in the original Hebrew. But anyway, okay, on to verse 7. I Okay, this chapter's not all that long. I was like, maybe I should stop pausing so much to explain things, but we're doing all right on time. That night God appeared to Solomon and said, "What do you want? Ask, and I will give it to you." Solomon replied to God, "You showed great and faithful love to David my father, and now you have made me king in his place. O Lord God, please continue to keep your promise to David my father, for you have made me king over a people as numerous as the dust of the earth. Give me the wisdom and knowledge to lead them properly, for who could possibly govern this great people of yours?" So, I think this was covered before, possibly back in 1 Kings, somewhere around there. But, like, God asks Solomon what he wants. Doesn't specify, just asks Solomon what he wants. And Solomon, being a newly instated king, and just recently hearing all these, all this encouragement from his father, and all this stuff that's about to happen that has been planned by David for years at least, if not decades. Solomon's like, I got a tough task ahead of me. Give me the smarts, give me the wisdom to handle this properly. So Hebrews says to go out and come in before this people rather than the wisdom and knowledge to lead them properly. Which I think the wording here in the main text is pretty much the general gist of what the Hebrew says. Going out and coming in before the people was probably just another way of saying, to lead them. So Solomon is asking God for the ability to lead them well, especially the wisdom, discernment, knowledge, all that, to lead the people well. And then we get to verse 11. God said to Solomon, "Because your greatest desire is to help your people, and you did not ask for wealth, riches, fame, or even the death of your enemies or a long life, but rather you asked for wisdom and knowledge to properly govern my people, I will certainly give you the wisdom and knowledge you requested. But I will also give you wealth, riches, and fame such as no other king has had before you or will ever have in the future." Solomon asks for wisdom from God. God's like, good answer. And since you've asked for the wisdom to lead my people, my chosen people, I'm definitely going to give you that. Like, that's no issue. In fact, I like your answer so much, I'm going to give you all these other things you didn't ask for as well, but that you probably want. Like, because who doesn't want wealth, riches, and fame to some extent? Some people might say that they don't want it, but really they don't want any of the negative things that they know tend to come with that. Such as, like, lacking privacy, or people bothering them for money, or other things of that sort. But if we could have the benefits of the wealth without the downsides, I'm sure pretty much any of us would want that to some effect. So God's here like, alright, I'm going to give you what you asked for, but I'm also going to give you these other things that you didn't ask for that I know you kind of want anyway. Okay, then we get to verse 13. Then Solomon returned to Jerusalem from the tabernacle at the place of worship in Gibeon, and he reigned over Israel. Solomon built up a huge force of chariots and horses. He had 1,400 chariots and 12,000 horses. He stationed some of them in the chariot cities and some near him in Jerusalem. The king made silver and gold as plentiful in Jerusalem as stone, and valuable cedar timber was as common as the sycamore fig trees that grow in the foothills of Judah. Solomon's horses were imported from Egypt and from Cilicia. The king's traders acquired them from Cilicia at the standard price. At that time, chariots from Egypt could be purchased for 600 pieces of silver, and horses for 150 pieces of silver. They were then exported to the kings of the Hittites and the kings of Aram. I would think not the ones that were meant to go to Solomon specifically were exported there. That might have just been where they were commonly traded to. I don't know. Or maybe those trades with the Hittites and Arameans was kind of where the standard prices mentioned here were sort of derived from. So I guess we get a little more detail now on what was mentioned in the first verse, that, you know, God made him very powerful. Because, yeah, having a lot of horses and chariots goes quite a ways to a strong army in that time. So, it doesn't say actually that they took the altar to Jerusalem with them. It just says that Solomon returned to Jerusalem after those events in Gibeon happened, with making the offerings and then, you know, getting the wish from God, you could say. And then there's also, you know, having all this gold and silver. Like, wealth can be a form of power too, as we see very easily in the modern day. And, like, power isn't necessarily just physical might, it could also be influence. So, wealth definitely helps, or adds to that kind of power. But, notes here, verse 14. Okay, could be chariots and charioteers rather than horses. I mean, I gotta say, 1,400 chariots. I mean, well, not necessarily all the horses would have been used in chariots per se. Like, that's not necessarily the case. Charioteers presumably would have been used, you know, with the chariots. But you could have had a rotating schedule of them. See, the thing is, that footnote mentions that word also being used in the second part of verse 14 here. But it doesn't say anything about that being the same word in, like, verse 16. So, maybe if it's that way in the original Hebrew, the translators were like, hold up, why are we talking about charioteers here and horses there? Although, I mean, it could be... because it's slightly different. I mean, obviously you need horses to pull the chariots. But having that many horses per chariot seems like a lot. I mean, I don't know. I shouldn't speak on that like I have deep knowledge of how many horses they typically use per chariot, or how many charioteers were typical per chariot. But anyway, point is, bunch of chariots, a lot of animals and or people to, run the chariots. And a lot of wealth. Lots of stuff. Lots of power. In various ways. Okay. The note there at the end of verse 15, the Hebrew reads the Shephelah rather than the foothills of Judah. Same thing, that was just more so the Hebrew name for that area. Calling it the foothills of Judah maybe gives a little bit more context for the average reader, even just geographically where it was. Okay, so horses were imported from Egypt, probably Muzar, a district near Cilicia. So when it mentions Egypt here, it's also that same word, probably that same place. But that just tells me it was probably like on the northern edge of Egypt, probably. Because wasn't Cilicia like elsewhere in the Mediterranean Sea? Maybe my memory's not quite right on that. Anyway, and instead of Cilicia there, Hebrew says Q or Kue. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Probably another name for Cilicia. Possibly derived from a different language or people group. 600 pieces of silver. Note there mentions that it was shekels, which would be about 15 pounds or 6.8 kilograms. And probably the note here at 150 pieces was also shekels, and it gives the weights. So yeah, the chariots clearly cost more than the horses, which I suppose makes sense, because people have to actually build the chariots. Horses, not so much. Just gotta feed them, really. So, yeah. There is kind of what seems to be the start of Solomon's reign as king, as told here in 2 Chronicles chapter 1. I'm sure we'll continue from there with more of him. Alright, so unsurprisingly, given how 1 Chronicles ended, 2 Chronicles starts with Solomon taking the reins, and it also gives us a reminder of him asking God for wisdom rather than riches or fame or power or anything like that. And so then God basically gives him all of it because he asked for the best thing, really. So yeah, not too much else to say about that. That whole thing has been covered back in 1 Kings. So anyway, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description for links to social media pages and all sorts of good stuff down there. Discord server, supporter page, all the socials, all the different ways to keep up with what I'm doing and what I'm involved with. And down below that, you can leave your thoughts and questions in the comment section. So that's all I got for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. Or whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.